So we got that. And if y'all are ready, I'm ready. Everyone?
Absolutely.
Ready to go.
Okay, let's kick this off. Hi, my name is Dr. Jennifer Butler, and I'm the director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion for the College of Business and Analytics here at SIU. And yes, that's a mouthful. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I want to welcome everyone to our panel entitled Envisioning Inclusivity, Transforming the Job Seeking Process and Making Hiring More Inclusive. So thank you for joining us. But before I get too carried away, because as you see, we have some really great speakers, I want to make a few announcements. So the first one is, in case you didn't notice, Tosin had a family thing come up, and in the midst of his planning, he managed to find a brilliant and amazing substitute to join us, and I couldn't be happier to welcome her to the panel. Second, as you heard me just a second ago, we are recording today's event so that our online students have access to the recording at a later date. So just a heads up on that. And then third, please make sure you sign in by going to the link that I'm going to be dropping in the chat. So you need to put your name and your dog tag. And this is because several professors have asked for attendance because I think they are offering some form of extra credit. But even if you're not sure, if your professor is one of them, please go ahead and drop your name and dog tag in the sign-in sheet. That way we have your name on record so we can be like, oh, you were one of the amazing people who attended. So with all of that out of the way, the format for today's panel is going to be something like this. I'm going to introduce our moderator. He's going to turn it over to the speakers, let them do a brief introduction of themselves, and then we will move directly into our first, second, third speakers, and then the amazing part, the question and answering session. I'm sure you'll have some questions for these amazing, amazing minds here. So if you can't wait and you're like me, you might forget it before you get to the question and answering session, feel free to go ahead and just drop the question in the chat. We'll be checking that and making sure that it gets to the speakers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel. He is a finance major who's a junior this year. A little known fact is that he actually started off as an automotive tech major before switching into finance. He loves to listen to music, and under much duress, he decided his walkout song is Essence, featuring Tim's by WizKid. And if that's not enough, he's a passionate student who's all about empowering his fellow students. And that's why I pretty much decided he would be the perfect person to moderate today's event. So please help me virtually welcome our moderator, Michael Penick. Mike?
Thank you, Jennifer. I just want to thank everyone for coming. I'm very interested in seeing how this panel goes tonight. And I'll make sure I do have a couple questions for you all. But to get us started, I want to have Jennifer start. And then we're going to go to Jay and Rocky, and that's going to be our lineup for the night.
Yeah, so and you want us to do quick bios, yes?
Yeah, just introductions before we all start the presentations.
My name is Jennifer Harold. I currently work at General Assembly, which is a upskilling boot camp that's been around, oh gosh, I want to say for a while now, a little bit now. I work on the career coach side. I also do partnerships for the Austin campus. So that's going to be building employer relationships for speaking engagements, mentorship, alumni stuff, but mostly to the end of helping graduates get jobs. I work with software engineering, data science, and UX/UI immersive students. So that's folks who are either upskilling or they're pivoting from I was driving Uber and now I want to be a software engineer. So they come in, they do 3 months, they come out software engineers. During that time, I teach a class called Outcomes, which is essentially 13 weeks of job readiness. And then afterwards, I take on a caseload of anywhere from 30 to 100 students and do personalized and group career coaching with them. Before that, I did about 6.5 years, 7 years in corporate side recruiting at some places that you may have heard of or definitely heard of, like Google and Indeed, some places that you have not, probably like Paylocity and RSR. And then in a totally previous life, I have a legal background with a focus on human and civil rights, particularly with juvenile justice and prisoners' rights and advocacy.
Great. All right. Am I next in the lineup here?
Yeah, you're next up.
I was sandwiched between awesome and awesome. This is well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's definitely an honor. My name is Jay Graves. I'm the founder of Pathfinder Business Consultants. we help empower leaders build and lead through diverse organizations. Prior to starting Pathfinder, I was a senior VP at Roche Diagnostics, which is just down the road in Indianapolis. Actually started my career there as a sales rep, picked up the bag, kind of cut my teeth there, and worked my way up through management and sales and marketing. And then ultimately in my last role, I led the sales organization for North America, so Canada and the US. And then prior to that, I spent 10 years in the military. So I enlisted in the military, and then I went to college and I got my degree, got my commission, went back in the military as a counterintelligence and interrogation officer. So as I'm kind of working backwards through my career, that was definitely a defining point for me. I was part of the invasion in Iraq in 2003, left there, and 3 months later I was learning how to sell diabetes equipment. So it's a big transition in my career there. But really, culmination of during that time, I learned a lot about diversity. It's very personal to me. I'm an interracial person who grew up in the South back when being interracial was considered still a little Jim Crow-ish illegal. So I watched what my parents had to go through, my own personal experiences, probably like a lot of people on here, first person going to college, all that good stuff. So it's been a long but really fun journey. And at this point in my career, I just want to take that culmination of knowledge and experiences and help as many companies as I can really embrace the power of diversity and the force multiplier that diversity can bring. And individuals like you on here, the early in career folks and the people who can really invigorate organizations in our world. So I'll cut it there and pass it over to my big sister, Rocky.
Yeah, I guess we did beauty before age this time around, huh? So
I don't know to call it COVID beard. My daughter says it's depression beard. I don't know.
I love it. I like the beard, little bro. Hi, everybody. My name is Rocky Howard. I identify as she, her, Black, Christian, Gen X, wife, mom. So we'll talk a little bit about that when I've got time on the stage, the virtual stage. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at Smart Recruiters. I'm the host of the Grown Woman Life and the Voices of Diversity podcast. I'm a wife and mother of 4. I've been married for 30 years as of last week. So that's a monumental achievement and accomplishment. I have a 30-year career in the HR and talent acquisition space. And I think when I think about how I got into a focus in diversity, it was really about realizing that as a woman, as a Black woman, as a mother of Black children, as a wife of a Black man, I had a responsibility to make it better for not only people of color, but people of all dimensions of diversity. And that's really important to me. When I spent, like I said, I spent 30 years in the recruitment business. And one of the things that you see when you're in recruiting is you see all the way that biases show up, and you see all of the challenges in the process that could be simplified. And you realize just how complex diversity is. And so for me, it was about using my power and privilege as a leader to make space for individuals who were of multiple dimensions of diversity. And as a result of some of that work that I did, I've been recognized as a top 100 minority executive globally. And really, though, the benefit and the success was in the opportunities that I was able to create for others. I love being in this setting, so we're going to have a real conversation. I served on the Butler University and the Kelley School of Business Career Services Advisory Board, speaking to students just like you, and being that voice that would tell you not what you want to hear, but tell you the truth and the reality of what it's like when you go out there and interview. And that's what you should expect a bit from me today. Did some of that work at UT as well, and just really happy to be here and hopefully share a nugget or two of wisdom with you today.
Thank you all for your interesting facts about, just who you are in general. And I want to kick it off to Jennifer to start off with the panel.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Jay and Rocky as well. These are incredible careers, and they are doing really incredible things in the diversity and inclusion space. And anyone who has done DEI work, even for a second, knows that that's not easy work to do. It's not easy work to do. And so for Rocky to say that she's been doing it for 30 years, a 30-year DE&I career is not the same as any other kind of 30-year career. So I really commend you for that, truly. So to that end, Jennifer mentioned that I'm kind of filling in for Tosin, and so it was a little short notice, and we talked a little bit about what's going on and what's going and what the theme is, and that y'all are kind of in Diversity Week. And I was thinking about all of the things that go into diversity recruiting and diversity and talent acquisition and into that space in the job market. And I think, I started thinking for 15 minutes, what is some really practical advice I think that I could talk to you about and things that you could walk away with. And part of it is, I wanted to give kind of a little truncated, modified lecture that I used to give to employees in mentorship when I was doing trainings for employee resource groups. And then I give to my students now that is formally and informally titled, These People Don't Got Two Heads. And so realistically, this is what I wanted to communicate to y'all. There is a lot of work being done by a lot of really brilliant people, two of them of which are sitting here right now, to begin to do the work of diversity and inclusion in the hiring process and dismantle a lot of systems that are specifically set up for the purpose of excluding people of multi-diverse backgrounds and intersectional identities. And they are working to create pathways to employment. They're working to try to transform the way that employers hire. They are working to generate like more diverse pipelines to do all of these things and kind of actively dismantle this. For y'all, one of the big things too that it's important to keep in mind though is there's a lot of work being done to make sure that you have these opportunities. Because the idea that there is not Black and brown and female talent, this concept of diverse talent scarcity is a myth. And y'all just prove that myth by existing. So the fact that you are getting your education, that you're here, that you're going into the workforce realistically, there are straight, heteronormative, able-bodied white folks who are going out and they're in the same classes as you. They're doing the same things that you're doing. They're getting the same education that you're getting. And when they go forward and you begin to see, maybe as a Black woman, I didn't get a promotion, or I'm getting paid less on the dollar, or I'm not getting the same opportunities. These people don't got two heads. They're not doing something that I cannot do. So realistically, there's a two-part thing that's going on here. Number one, it's the systems that are in place and there's structural dismantling that happens. The other thing that often happens, and y'all might have heard this, and I know some folks are freshmen, and so I don't know if this has come up yet, but this concept of imposter syndrome, right? And this idea that you're getting into spaces, and maybe I'm a little bit in over my head, and we talk a lot about, and there's TED Talks galore about how to defeat imposter syndrome. And I think there's a couple of things that we can click into here. Number one, imposter syndrome is not something that you have to take ownership of and say, I'm not well positioned, I'm not doing well, and try to dismantle your imposter syndrome. Hit the ground running and just say yourself as competitive talent. Again, there are people all over the talent space and all over the world who are doing things poorly. They are getting paid to do things poorly. They have no intention of ever getting better at the things that they are doing, and they will continue to rise. To have as much confidence in your excellence as these people have in their mediocrity is a learned skill and it's a practice. So a couple of things that y'all can do, I think now, as your college students, to begin to, number one, build up your confidence, but two, set yourself off on the right foot when you graduate to hit the ground running. That's going to be outside of maybe those typical career things, is to begin to build up, like, what is your professional identity? You do not have to know exactly what you want to do right now to kind of be a little bit more competitive when you come into contact with these systems that are kind of stacked against y'all. So I wanted to give you, I think it's three quick things that you can do now and begin to do now, so that when you're going out into the workforce as talent, you're a little bit more competitive. And it kind of starts to build up your confidence as you go out there to make sure that you're positioned well to move into these roles. Number one, the first thing that I would do is just to start keeping track of your accomplishments and the feedback that you get. Your resume, physically keep a list of these things. It's going to help you build out your post-grad resume. So as you're going through right now, coming out of college with a well-done resume is a good look for you. So just start to keep track of, were you a leader in certain class projects? Were there internships that you did? Was there feedback that you got, particular feedback that you got from mentors or from professors? Begin to keep a list of those things. That's going to help you build out your resume and make you a little bit more competitive in some spaces. The main thing too is going to be to begin to professionally socialize. Most people get their jobs from networking, and networking has wildly changed. From how when I was doing it, I'm going to assume from how when Rocky and Jay were doing it. And even since COVID has started, there's so much opportunity right now for y'all to be engaging in these spaces with people who can really move your careers forward, begin to mentor you. And it's not just going to a conference room or going to the student union. The power of the internet has opened up so much opportunity for y'all. So one thing that I would advise would just begin to start to professionally socialize. This can look like events, and I'll send out a resource guide, going to events like this, looking at public facing events. If you're interested in engineering, look at events that are hosted by engineers for engineers. You don't only have to go to student events. Signing up for networking opportunities and mentorship opportunities like Lunch Club. And then I cannot stress this enough, get yourself a LinkedIn. Get yourself a LinkedIn. I'll send some resources about how to begin to build that up. But a college student with a well-done LinkedIn is a flex. It just is. So being able to do some of those things will be useful as well. And then I think too, own your narrative and kind of move in your own identity. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? How do you want to talk about that? And start to move in those spaces now. I think if you know that you want to be in engineering, start reaching out to different folks that you could talk to in that space. I think if you want to be in education, if you want to be a career coach, if you want to do all these things, begin to kind of explore relationships outside of the ecosystem that's just the people around you, but start to reach out to some of these places, these bigger companies, startups, those kinds of things, and begin to decide and build a narrative for yourself and start to build your confidence up a little bit.
Great. All right. Is it my turn?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't find my mute button for a second. I was tapping around trying to get it.
No, that's okay. All right. Well, that's great, Jennifer. Actually, what's really interesting is it kind of leads right into some of the points that I wanted to make tonight. I definitely wanted to touch on imposter syndrome, because that's something that I really, really had to deal with. So as I did my introduction, I kind of talked about my career backwards, but Jay sitting in the position that many of you are sitting in today, I was not a great high school student, and I had to really turn things around the last 2 years of my high school career. And it took mentors and people taking care of me and guiding me to get me to where I was able to even probably have the right to even fill out an application. And so because of that, I really busted my tail. And because of that, I was able to get into school, but I was the first person to ever go to college in my family. So I didn't get any guidance or anything like that from family members or anybody telling me here's how you fill a school loan. Here's how you do this, here's what you're going to face. So I kind of had to figure it out myself. And on top of that, again, kind of going back to the times, I was getting a lot of, well, the only reason why Jay got in there is because of affirmative action. They need more Black people in college. And I went to NC State. I don't know if anybody knows NC State, but it was not predominantly very mixed at the time. And so, I heard a lot of that. So that just started to kind of chip away, quite frankly, at my confidence and my belonging. I would sit there in groups and sometimes think, do I really belong to be sitting here in this group and in this conversation? And, like I said, when I left college, I went into the military. And I think that maybe made things a little bit easier transition, maybe a little bit kind of going into the quote unquote workforce, but I still had that kind of baggage with me going into the military. And so I was hesitant to put myself out there for opportunities at first. And then finally, I don't know, something just triggered. I had a couple of mentors and they were like, you need to speak up. You need to know that you deserve to be standing right here. And so that's something that I definitely want to make sure that you hear is as you go into that workforce, you deserve to be where you are and definitely have confidence in that. It took me a long time to really learn that. That's real, right? You know, I was getting promotions, I was leading people all over the world, I was doing fantastic things, but then psychologically, I was still questioning myself. And again, it took a lot of self-reflection for me to really get to the point where I said, you know what, I deserve it. I've earned it. I don't want to listen to these people who are trying to drag me down, or they're just kind of thinking the way maybe previous generations thought. This is a new day and we're striking out on a new day, and we deserve to be here. So, you know, I that's one thing that I want to make sure you really think about is have confidence as you're going out there. The other part is, you know, you've got the academics, right? You've been going to school now for several years, you're getting ready to get that degree, you're walking out, and you got the academics, but take time to really think about yourself. This is something that I wish somebody would have told me when I was in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s is, Jay, what is it? You're still trying to kind of discover who you are, but what is it that makes you your superpower? What is it that allows you to thrive? You know, what is it? Who are you? And really take the time to think about that, because I can tell you that, you know, I've not been on the recruiting side. I think really kind of probably my role here on this panel is I've not been in talent acquisition. I've been on the hiring side, and I've been on the side where I've started early in career programs and I've shaken up companies to think differently. And as somebody who started early in career programs, I looked for will and skill. And that's what I teach employers to do today is look for the will and the skill. It's your job as an employer to train and mentor. And that's why we're going to make sure you have mentorship programs and you have reverse mentorship programs and you have these things in place to allow people to thrive, but look for the will and the skill. So probably the biggest thing that I could say is coming out of here is have the confidence in yourself. If you have any doubts in the back of your head about, hey, you know, I'm a little nervous, should I be here? Yes. Tell yourself, yes, you deserve to be here. You worked hard to be there and you have something to really bring to the table. Figure out what that is and be sure that you can articulate that. You know, I think about there was an early career person that we brought into an IT department. And this was when I was in sales. And, you know, like most companies, you'll find that they kind of silo themselves, right? IT does IT, sales and marketing does sales and marketing, finance does finance. But I noticed there was something really interesting about this person. And one day she mentioned that she writes children's books. And I was like, wow, that takes a lot of creativity to be able to write children's books. Why don't you talk about that? And she was like, well, I'm embarrassed. I'm the IT person. And I was like, well, what if we unleash that creativity? And so at the time I was a marketing director and I invited her to come to a marketing meetings where we were really stuck on some problems. And she saw a totally different way of doing things and brought that creativity that allows her to be a great storyteller and somebody who can think creatively. And she ended up really unlocking this logjam for us. And it's interesting because the stuff that we were working on then is like a flagship product for this company today. And her fingerprints and influence is all over that. So again, you just really think about what are those other things that make you who you are as you're going into it and be able to articulate. Respect the journey. Respect the journey. There is, I will straight up tell you right now, there are perceptions about early in career and the generations entering the workforce right now that, well, you can't keep them, they'll leave, they job hop, all this other stuff. What I found was kind of the secret is let's keep people challenged. What I found is people just want to learn, they want to contribute. So they will stay with your company as long as you can continue to foster, mentor, grow individuals and give opportunities. Now, the reality is that doesn't always mean that there's going to be a promotion every 2 years or anything like that. Now, that's not to say to not challenge when you get really good in your role and you have opportunities, you say, you know, I'm ready. I've been working towards this. I want to put my hat in the ring for this next opportunity. It's not to say to shy away from that by any means. I can go for it. But the reality is a lot of companies may not have these opportunities. If you find yourself in this situation, help them think creatively. I put people on special projects. I sent people to different classes. I had people present things that they found, really unique opportunities for individuals. We had massive turnover issues, particularly amongst our early in career individuals before we started doing this. And it went to almost zero. And the great thing about it, I guess I'm kind of dating myself a little bit, but the great thing about it now are these are now the directors and the future VPs because of where they are in their career and how those early lessons and taking the time to respect the journey and grow and grow and grow and self-discovery and continue education, continue learning, contribute, all ended up accelerating where they are today. So I'll leave you with that. Make sure you take time to really think about who you are. Be confident in where you are. You deserve to be there, and make sure you bring your whole self to work and be confident in that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay and Jennifer. And now I want to move it on to Rocky.
Yeah, I think they're hard acts to follow, and Jay and Jennifer have given such incredible pieces of wisdom. I think I'm going to take this from a different direction, right? And so, first of all, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I do during the day, right? And who I do it for. So Smart Recruiters is an HR tech company, and we're officially the leaders in what we call the talent acquisition suite space. And so you're going, Rocky, what does that gobbledygook mean? Well, if you've ever applied for a job, right? You've gone online, you've clicked on someone's career site, you've seen the job posting, you've then had to enter and upload your resume, answer some questions, you may have gotten some automated responses, then you go through the interview process, you get a thanks but no thanks, or you get the next step, and then you get automated onboarding. The tech that facilitates all of that is what our company does. Obviously, we're not the only company that does it, but that's what our company does. And I say that to set the scene for you that fundamentally, our tech helps facilitate the recruiting process. And so as a chief diversity officer, I have a really interesting role, and my role is twofold. So I have the traditional CDO responsibilities where ultimately I am absolutely responsible for making sure that our company is a company that is built on the foundation of equity, inclusion, and belonging. And if you have a company where the culture is built on that foundation, diversity is an expectation, right? And here's one thing I know for sure. You cannot sustain diverse culture without equity and inclusion and belonging. Because if you show up and you don't feel included, or that feeling like I just don't belong, or I feel uncomfortable in the environment, ultimately you're not going to stay there. So my first priority is making sure that our teams and our employees feel like that culture and that we continue to grow our diverse population within our organization. There's another big piece of my role. And the other huge piece of my role is I spend time helping our over 4,000 enterprise clients help from a thought leadership perspective, from a collaboration perspective, and from a tech perspective, understand how they can better improve their diversity hiring outcomes. Okay. So I've done things like literally create a diversity hiring maturity model that allows companies to understand where are they in terms of their ability to hire and attract people like you who are diverse talent, who are the future. How do they do that within their organization? And to the point that Jennifer made earlier, this is about kind of eroding some of the systemic barriers that it takes for companies to recruit diverse talent. And one of the reasons why I wanted to set the stage for you for that is because there's something important here for you to understand. So we have given that we have an assessment that companies can take so they can assess their maturity model. And it's so important to our organization that people have their ability to do that. And they remove the excuse of, I don't know how to attract diverse talent, that our company has created it and we've put it out into the universe for free for any company that wants to do it. And they literally get this 20-page report that people can go back to their desk and say, this is how I can recruit diverse talent better, right? And that's a perfect example of how corporations and CEOs need to step up and change the diversity narrative and make it easier to further diversity and inclusion goals within the job seeking process. And so what we have said to companies is that maturity model is based on 4 key pillars. So we've said to companies, we all know, so you guys will all know, right? How many of you have a theme song or a commercial that sticks in your head? Like Jay and I are old enough that we probably could sing the Oscar Mayer Wiener song back to back. Oh, I wish I were an Oscar Mayer Wiener. That is what I truly like to be. Or what about Toys R Us? I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. I've not been a kid in many years, right? But those brands are forever struck in my mind because they had what we call strong brand equity. So we have said to our companies, you understand that it's easier to attract talent if you have a strong employer brand equity, but what is your diversity brand equity, right? So I'll give you an example. I had a client in my previous life that I know for sure was doing some incredible things from a diverse talent perspective. But when you went to their website, when you looked at their social media, et cetera, which is what you all do, what you saw was the typical clip art where there was one woman stuck in there and they were all standing in a V and there were no people of color and there was all these white dudes and there was one that had a little bit of gray hair and that was their version of diversity. And I literally said to them, I would take a look, I would click on that. And as a Black woman over 40, I would keep going because what your diversity brand equity has told me is that there's not a place for me. So how are you letting people across multiple dimensions of diversity know that they are welcome here? And that's important. How are you communicating your commitments around diversity? How is it that you're saying that this is a priority, yet no job description tells about your commitment to diversity? So we're helping companies understand that if you want great talent like you all, you want to let that talent know that they're welcome. Thing number 2, we're saying learn how to source strategically, right? Let's stop posting and praying and hoping that everybody goes to the same pool, right? You may have different interests, So let's make sure we're sourcing strategically. Let's stop this narrative that good diverse talent doesn't exist. Let's just stop this excuse. And so we give companies all of these particular kind of fundamentals on how they can better attract all of you all, right? Thing number 3 is, how do you have a fair and equitable hiring process? So I'm going to share an example with you. Some of you who were here on the call as we were chatting heard me tell Jay that I was in Indianapolis last week. And I was in Indianapolis because I was asked to speak on diversity to a group of staffing people. So it was like 300 people in the room. Of those 300 people, I promise you there were probably 5 Black people in the room. And so I had everybody do this exercise, right? And so the exercise was, if you identify as male, please stand up, right? So all of these men stood up and I'm like, if you have ever interviewed with a panel full of women, everybody in the interview panel was women, sit down. One dude sat down, right? So it's like, okay, men, stand back up. If you have ever been asked in an interview what your plans are to have babies or what your family plans are, sit down. Of course, no man sat down. And then we did one other thing. We were like, okay, please stand up if you identify as white. Well, I told you the 350 people, 246 of them stood up, right? And then the question was, have you ever been interviewed by an all Black interview panel? If you can, sit down. Of course, nobody sat down. And so then my question to people was, think about this. If you are if you are feeling uncomfortable just having to stand here and admit that, let's think about how your candidates feel when they come in and they don't see anyone in the interview process that looks like them, and more importantly, can relate to their lived experience. And so every human being has bias. And if you don't have anyone to counteract the bias of the lived experience of the person sitting on the other side, then how do you move the needle forward? Okay. And so the final thing we talked about is organizational support. It's important that everybody in the organization recognize that they play a role in this diversity narrative, whether it's from the recruiting perspective. Jay talked about being a hiring manager, whether you're the receptionist that welcomes people coming in the door. Diversity does not belong to a chief diversity officer. It belongs to everyone in the organization. Now, let me tell you the truth. Bias still exists. It exists strongly in the process, but I don't believe most people are malicious. The problem is this is really complicated for people to unravel because it sits in places that people aren't even sure it exists. It is part of their upbringing. It's part of their value system and how they think, and they don't recognize that the bias exists. So I say this to you to say, the companies are really trying to move this needle forward and trying to unravel that. Yet at the same time, we recognize that as you're going out there to interview, you're still going to feel this. My friends over at Matheson did a report of candidates, and it was really interesting. Like 50% of diverse candidates said that they felt like their diversity created a challenge in the recruiting process. 62% said they've seen bias in the interview process. 50% have observed exclusionary terms in job descriptions. And despite the fact that companies are saying diversity is our top priority, only 6% of those respondents said they have clarity on the employer's goals or efforts. So these are the things you're looking for. So I think what I want to kind of walk through with you is, what can you do? Because this stuff hasn't gone away. Let's just be real. Companies are trying, but they're still struggling and they're still working it through. So then what does that mean to you? As you go out there to search, here's what I would suggest you do. And Jennifer gave you some great tips. I'd like to add on to those. When you think about what industry you want to go into, understand what those industry norms and the culture is. Right? It's important for you to do that. It's very different if you want to go and be in investment banking than if you want to be a graphic artist. And there's different norms there. And so sometimes we go into a situation where we don't align to the norms and we want to think that it's a diversity issue. It's not. It's a understanding that environment and what those norms are. Excuse me. And so you need to think about, are those the norms that I want to follow? And I'll give you a great example. I worked for a vendor of a global investment bank. And so we were going to go see a client. And I have to tell you, like, I'm a senior leader, right? Like, I'm CEO -1. And my boss, as we were going through that client, said, Rocky, will you take your nose ring out? And my answer was, no, I'm happy not to go, but I'm not going to compromise. Now, let me just tell y'all something. You can't do that when you are just entering your career. Okay. Which brings me to the next section, right? Hone your skills. Hone your skills. Know how you add value to the company. Be very clear in it. Be able to articulate in it. Like Jay said, be confident that you have a seat at the table. You're there for a reason. Like Jennifer said, like, constantly update your resume, like get your brag file, know what that's about, but hone your skills and know how you add value. I knew how I added value. If they didn't want the value, I was able to walk away, and they had to make a decision. They made the decision that the value was more important, but that takes some time to build. You also need to understand what your personal value situation is. Where are your boundaries? Where do you not cross the line? I'm a God girl. I make it really clear that I'm a Christian and I'm a God girl. I'm not going to shut that down. And there are things that will cross my personal boundaries that I'm not willing to participate in. I understand that there's a price to be paid for that at the time, but you have to decide where your personal boundaries are. And it's okay for those to be flexible and change over time, but be clear about your personal value system. Let me just tell you, I don't think you should hide in closets. Like when we all grew up, it was all about, okay, let me modernize my name so people don't recognize that I'm of a particular culture or that I'm of a particular religion, or let me not identify as part of the LGBTQ community, or let me pass. I don't believe in hiding in closets. Life is too short. Make sure you identify with the companies and the cultures that welcome you where you are. Jennifer talked about this, so I'm just going to mention it again. Strategically craft your brand. Know who you are and how that aligns to what you want to be. And I will say two other things that we don't often talk about. If you need accommodations, like if you're neurodiverse, if you have, a disability, don't be afraid to mention that. And please don't be afraid to ask for the accommodations. It's important that you set yourself up for success. And if you need the accommodation to do that, don't be afraid to ask. And let me just say one other thing. You need to be appropriately humble and realistic. I know that you all are excited that you have your degrees. I'm so excited for you. I'm so proud of you, but so do a million other people. Okay. So don't think, oh my God, I got my degree, and so now I'm going to go lead the world and make six figures, and you should do that for me today. Be realistic and be humble and look for opportunities that will allow you to grow. And I think understand the world you're working in. So as I wrap up today, I will tell you there were two young people that I met when I was at that conference. One young man came up to me and said, oh my gosh, thank you so much for inspiring us, for making my perspective heard. I would love to be able to keep in touch with you. Like, thank you so much. For sure, and he was so positive, for sure, he will be able to call me forevermore. There was another young lady that I met who was like, well, I almost quit this job because I'm the only, Black woman here, and that's uncomfortable, and blah, 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 blah. And I just literally said to her, the reason I could stand on that stage today is because I made it past all those places where I was the only one. And if you're not willing to put the work in to do that, go work at McDonald's and just give up now. Okay. So I guess to wrap that up, it really is about your perspective. The barriers are not going to go away overnight. No, the companies are working through this. This is about how you show up and how you navigate those barriers.
Thank you, Rocky. And I want to thank everyone again. We had three great minds to give out even greater insight. And with that being said, I want to open the floor up to questions if anybody has any. Well, to start off, in case anyone is shy for questions, I have a question that can be made more, it's a more personal question, but it can be made more general, so it can be kind of applied to everyone. Considering that I've changed my major from such a broad change, I had my mind set on everything I was gonna do in automotive, and now it's boom, your finance. So I've talked to different friends and other classmates, and I know some other people that feel the same way. How would you recommend getting that past that mental block of basically just being stuck? Like, where do you go from this point on? You have, you drilled in your mind, this is that, and now you're onto something different, just like that.
Well, I'll give a shot. So I started off as a finance major, realized that I absolutely hated numbers and was not very good at it. I was then an anthropology and archaeology major, loved it, realized there's not much of a career there. And then I went to political science, loved it, and that's where I ended up. So I guess I would ask, there were triggers that made each one of those decisions for me in my life. And it was really that fact that I was young. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was figuring it out. And as I became more and more educated and exposed to these different areas, I made the changes. So I think I would ask, what caused those changes? Be okay with those changes. No, as a hiring person, I have never asked anybody about what your different classes were, what major you started off with. Again, all I cared about was, the will, the skill, your value add to the organization, your culture add to the organization. Everything else is in the past. I think Rocky kind of said it, really proud. You're going to get your degree. You're going to walk out. You're going to be one of many people. So it's not so much about, the different degrees and everything that you had. It's what do you bring to the table, and really being confident in that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Like, the question that I ask every single person that I interview, regardless of level, is this question, Michael, at the end of the interview, is if this job came down between you and another person, why should I choose you versus that other person, right? You've got to put all that aside. Doesn't matter like how you got to your path. Hell, I don't even have a degree. So you're already 10 steps ahead of me, right? And so you have to put all that aside, and you have to be able to articulate why you deserve that seat and why you did that. I think to Jay's point, no one, you may get the random person that asks about why the change. Be honest about it. I find, honestly, truth tells a whole lot of things. You can't tell a lie the same way twice. My grandmother used to say, tell the truth. When someone asks you why, tell them why. I changed my freaking mind. Like, that's okay, but here's what you've got to be able to do. At the end of the day, it's about what kind of value can you bring to the company. And so you need to be able to answer that question, because there's only one wrong answer to why you versus someone else. And the only wrong answer is, I don't know. Because guess what? If you don't know, then I don't know. Right? So really, it's about you having confidence in the decision that you've made. And honestly, I spent time in automotive. I worked, Allison Transmission was a client of mine. There's a lot of things that you learn there that are very transferable in what you're going to do with finance, right? So take it from the transferable skills. But at the end of the day, you've got to have that narrative ready.
I think I would take a slightly different approach to advice on this in a couple of ways. One, I think too, the part about like making sure that like you're not letting the fact that you changed your mind kind of drag down your confidence. Y'all are in college. You're not supposed to know exactly what you want to do. You're supposed to learn, right? And so in the same way that like C's get degrees, everybody that walk out of here is walking out with a degree that says SIU. Do you see what I'm saying? I think a lot of people had majors. I think I had like 7 majors before the University of Florida was like, ma'am, you are on a scholarship. You got to get up out this school. So pick something before this money runs out. But I will say this, and I say this to job pivoters all the time. So job pivoter, I think Jay talked about being job hoppy. So someone who they maybe did one thing in their career and then they kind of did something else in their career. There's a couple of things too. I always encourage my students and my private side clients to lean into those changes. There's a couple of things here. Number one, lean into what led you to make those changes, because that's an important part of your narrative. And that's an important part of like your personal brand, right? So for you to be able to say, I was in automotive because these are the things that like appeal to me in that space, but I actually pivoted and I moved into finance for this reason. That's an authentic storytelling, and that's you dictating the narrative to the people in front of you. So that's you saying, no, I'm not loosey-goosey and I just didn't, decide that I was going to up and leave my major. I made a conscious, intentional decision after I sat down and I evaluated the path that I was on, and I made a deliberate turn into another direction. The other thing that I would say is sit down with yourself. And I do a workshop with adult students and with adult seekers on what is the thread in your relationship, in your jobs. So when I have someone who's like kind of job hopping, we do have to kind of figure out, okay, how do we explain to employers what's going on here? What's the commonality? What's the common thread in the things that you do? So I am someone who has had a bunch of different careers, but I've never had a problem going through and explaining to someone Why were you in rare books and special collections? Then you were in law, then you were in recruiting, then you were in diversity acquisition, and now you're in career coaching. Because I have learned to articulate that as, it's not that I changed my mind, it's that I've always had one passion, which is access, making sure that people have access to the things that they need, whether it be information, their legal rights, jobs, or coaching for opportunities. That's the thing that I care about. And so I take this passion and I've built my skill set in this really amazing way in all of these different places, right? And so it's one of those things where like, you just tell people how they're going to feel about what you're doing. I tell my students, it's the Netflix example. So if you come to me and say, what'd you do this weekend? And I'm like, I didn't really do nothing. Like, I kind of just sat at home. Like, I didn't get out of my pajamas. I talked to the dog. I just watched a ton of Netflix and like, I just ate a bunch of food. Y'all gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna pray for you, like safe space, right? But if you say, what'd you do this weekend? And I say, I didn't do anything. I didn't get out of my pajamas. The only person I talked to was my dog. I ate a bunch of food and I watched Netflix. All of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, self-care is essential. Like, great job. Like, you're doing all the things right. And nothing has changed except for the way that I'm talking about myself to my audience. So I would say for you or for anyone who's in that space, you don't say, how do I, deal with the fact that I had a bunch of different majors? You didn't have a bunch of different majors. What you did is you took advantage of the college experience and the college opportunity, and you explored all of your skills and passions in a really interesting way. And you landed on finance. And that's how you came to this position.
Thank you all for that. I can apply this to myself and everyone else who's asked me 9,000 questions about the topic as well. And we do have a question in the chat. It's what are some strategies students can use to combat imposter syndrome?
I think we started to talk about it earlier, and I think it starts with what Jennifer said about logging your accomplishments, right? I think too, it's so funny. I was talking to a colleague of mine, Tracy Edmonds has written a book geared towards women that's called Wild Hair. And I had a chat with Tracy earlier today. She's phenomenal, right? But she was talking about, this whole piece and this whole place where we focus on our weaknesses, because as you go through school, it's kind of, this is what you need to go better. As you come into workplace, a lot of the systemic processes are about, here are what you need to work on, instead of here's what your strengths are. And so I think now we're starting to go lead from a place of your strengths, right? So I built a whole career around that. I mean, I literally started as a temp receptionist for a temp firm and went, oh my God, there's a whole industry where I can talk all day to people and make money. Cool, because I am really freaking good at talking to people. So I led with my strengths and developed a whole 30-year career around it, right? So I think for me, there's a couple things about imposter syndrome. It is, let's recognize that it's false evidence appearing real. 90% of the time, if you have the seat at the table, you were given the seat for the reason, and you can't let fear stop you from doing what you're supposed to accomplish at that. It's about recognizing what your strengths are. It's about being honest about the other stuff, but not letting it take you down. And I think the other thing about that is, who are you surrounding yourself with? Both from a friendship standpoint, a personal board kind of standpoint is what I call it, from a mentor standpoint, and from a sponsor standpoint. Those people can be truth tellers to you, but one of the things that they can do the best is to tell you strengths that you have and superpowers that you have that you may not even be able to see in yourself. And I will tell you, Jay, I'll toss it to you, because Jay is part of my personal board. Jay is like a little brother to me. And, he and I can clearly articulate each other's strengths. And I think sometimes you need to hear it from someone else, because you may not see it in yourself.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny because there's actually a book called Strength Finders, and it's something that I implemented when I was at Roche and I was building our leadership programs. And it's something that I work with a lot of my clients with, either that or a couple other programs where it really does hone in on what's your strength, as Rocky said, what's your superpower. It's so important, because that is also, we've talked about it a couple of times, I think, here in some of the comments, is that, how are you going to articulate yourself? How are you going to separate yourself? Well, it's really that self vision of yourself, and that self-assessment, and really knowing your strengths on there. But Rocky's right. It's who you surround yourself with. I would not be sitting here today being able to be with individuals like Jennifer and Rocky and being able to talk with you if it wasn't for people who intervened in my life as sponsors, as mentors, as guides. And it's really funny because I never knew those terms as they were helping guide me. And my wife and I were both in the military. And one time she said to me, she said, "Oh, I have a really great mentor." And I was like, "Mentor? Like, what do you need somebody for? Like, you know what you're doing. You're a really great leader. And, I don't need anybody. I'm really successful." And she was like, "You're an idiot," which, she's right. I didn't realize until it was later on in my career, and I started really thinking about mentors and being a mentor and helping coach people, and building sort of that village around you of strength. How powerful mentors can be in your life. And, as Rocky said, like, we pick up the phone, we know how each other ticks. We can tell when things are good, when things are bad, and when we need to support each other. And we have transparent conversations, questions, and everything else. You need those people, but you need those people too who aren't going to coddle you. Because while I can be a very tough guy, I'm also very sensitive at times. And sometimes I like to, hear really nice things. And that is not what I need to hear at those times. I need somebody that can hit me between the eyes, can tell me, like my wife did, "You're an idiot. You're thinking about this all wrong." It's those people that have really been there and said, "Jay, I know you don't want to hear this, but I'm going to tell you because I love you. And I want to see you be successful. This is going to hurt, but it's coming from a good place." You got to seek those people out. Might not be your mom, might not be your dad, because, we coddle our kids, but look for those people. Surround yourself with those people. We call it a tribe, right? Build your tribe. Surround yourself with that tribe.
And that was a very important thing to touch on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, please read the chat if you're not, because Jennifer is putting in some excellent points in the chat as well.
Yeah, I definitely got sidetracked reading some of that. I zoned out for a second.
Yeah, I like that, like the victory wall and what you're talking about there around your accomplishments. One thing I used to tell people as they started getting in their career, even if they weren't looking for another job, and these were people that I did not want to ever leave my team because they were great, but I always said, make sure you're updating your resume at least twice a year, because it's just a forced way to sit there and really take the time to think about what you have accomplished and your worth and what you bring to the table, and just so you walk away with that confidence. And I see Rocky showing her wall.
I am. And so what you guys will see here is a bit of a victory wall. So there's all these heart-shaped things. And I love my wife from my husband, which is, what I'm motivated by. But all of these hearts that you see here in my previous company, what we would do is for Valentine's Day, you could send, like, we went old school, right? Like, do you remember being a kid? You in your classroom, you got a Valentine, and it was really cool, right? And we decided as adults, like, we still wanted that. And so what we did every year is that you could send anyone a Valentine. And when I left my old company, I took those with me. Those are 3 years worth of Valentines where my team is telling me how I helped and inspired them. And so when I'm having a bad day, when I need to remember why I get up and do this work, when I remember what I'm good at and what my value prop is, I can look over at that wall and go, oh, that's what it's about. And it's instant gratification. So I can tell you for sure that victory wall works.
Yeah, I got to add just one more quick thing. A lot of this is about documenting what you're doing and recognizing yourself and documenting that. So as you are managing your career, there are going to be those times when it gets just more and more and more competitive. You know, maybe if the higher you go up, a lot of times it's like a pyramid, right? There's less opportunities. So being able to articulate what you've done, what you bring to the table is so important when you get into those promotion and the raises and things like that. So I just wanted to add that in. I know we're talking about going into the workforce, but when you're in there, you still got to fight. It's still competitive. You still need to make your way. So if you're the one sitting there and you're documenting all this and you're squared away on your narrative and you're competing against 3 other people that aren't, you put yourself ahead of the game. So I'll end it there.
Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm going to pass it back off to Jennifer because I'm not too sure where I'm supposed to go from here.
Oh, thank you, Mike, and thank you, everyone. This has been amazing. I dropped the speaker's LinkedIn if you didn't get it in the chat. And for those of you who came in after the announcement, please make sure that you go scroll back through the chat for the virtual sign-in sheet so that we can make sure that your professors give you the extra credit. So everyone, thank you so much. Speakers, Jennifer, Rocky, Jay. I can't even express how grateful I am for y'all joining us this evening and taking the time to just lay down that wisdom and knowledge. So thank you very, very much. Before we go, I want to just make one quick announcement, and this is more about future events. So ODI, the office that I represent, is hosting another event on September 21st from 5 to 6 p.m. It's called Financial Health in the Post-Pandemic World. We're going to hear from Nashira Linton, the CEO and founder of Breaking Cycles. We get to hear her story. She's a first-generation Panamanian American. She went $60,000 in debt, even though she had a job on Wall Street, and got the motivation to break the cycle of debt, hence the name of her company. And she's going to be talking about financial health from the inside out. And so this is going to also be a really great event. We are co-sponsoring with the Hispanic and Latino Resource Center. So this is going to be during Hispanic Heritage Month. So I really hope that y'all will join us next month. Wow, that's like tomorrow, but I mean like September 21st. For this event. And thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or hopefully contact our speakers, connect with them at least. Don't harass them. That's not why I'm giving you their LinkedIn's, but do feel free to follow them and reach out if there's something that you feel is pertinent. They are the sweetest people. I mean, Rocky even wished me happy birthday. How amazing is that? So I was like claim to fame. Forget it, mom. Forget it, dad. Rocky Howard wished me happy birthday.
You need to put that on your accomplishment wall.
Right? I'm going to. That's it. 2021. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining us and have a great evening.
Good luck, everybody.
Thanks for having us here.
Take care.
Hi. Also, just so y'all know, you should feel free to harass me. I love working with students. So if you want to talk about resume stuff, coaching, any of those things, please, let's do it. Let's get it going. Because a lot of coaching and a lot of the things that happen are just no one ever told us stuff that
Right.
other people are getting told. So I will tell you the things. Just let me know.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.